So what we have here is a small piece of paper, actually smaller than A4. I've just drawn out the edges of what will be this part of this tree trunk. Very simple parallel lines. Doesn't have to be exactly as it is or was in the photograph. What I do want to achieve now is to try and get the gradation from dark over to light. As we said when we looked at this earlier, we could arguably split it into three shapes: dark, medium, light, if we wanted to. So what I'm using is simply some burnt umber and a tiny little bit of burnt sienna in there. I don't know if you can see, this is what I've got right here. I've also damped this section with a very, very light stain. You might just be able to see that. And what I'm going to do really is just apply the paint in the areas that we see, if you like, as being darker for at this moment. So I'm obviously it's this edge here. There's a lovely little area here, and this comes down right there. So there's quite a lot of deep color in here. So I'm gonna flood that across there to about the not quite the halfway mark, and then simply use my water to bleed the other tones. So in other words, this is what I'm putting on here. You can see is pretty much just a damp brush. So we're graduating the tone from left across to right, adding a little bit more water, not too much, you know, just enough to keep the paint moving, if you like, and that's softening the edges for me. So, you know, I'm going to leave that at the moment, for a moment I should say, just to create a base into which you can see I'm just feathering that out slightly, teasing it slightly more, leaving a base or creating a base which will give us a starting point for the rest of the tones and the surfaces. So all we've got now is dark, medium, light. In fact, what I might just do is just make the medium area more medium. In other words, I'm putting a little bit of paint on there into that wet. You see that? So that there's a tone that's kind of halfway between the other two, and it's allowing this edge to be lighter. So it's an uneven, deliberately even gradual blend, because we're getting that natural form beginning to happen within the tree. What I'm doing now, whilst this is kind of drying, is just to apply, I've mixed some a little tiny speck of viridian green into my burnt umber, and just that's making a very earthy, it will make a very earthy green. You'll see in a second. The reason for this is there's some nice dark tones in the background which I want to happen to show up the tree itself. So I'm just going to get that up to the edge there and let that flood in there. And I'm going to do a similar thing across this way. So again, we're only putting a base color or base tone on so that we can isolate the tree a little bit more and work from there. I'm going to let that go on up over the top there, and just let the water run around, you know. A little bit more umber and a little bit more burnt sienna in here, just to drop that in so it's more natural. Make a few marks, so you can see I'm just suggesting some marks in the background to create a little bit of life, and a wee bit of maybe suggestions of grass and undergrowth and foliage there. But it really is more an excuse to create deeper tone. As you can see already, that is allowing the lighter edge of the tree to jump forward. But you know, that's enough. It's very important to try and allow that paint to do its own thing. You can see it moving around here, and it's going to take its own form. My board is slightly tilted because of the camera. I want to see show the camera, but I can move the board around. I could tip it up and so on until I'm happy with the way the paint runs. But what I've got here is a wee bit more of an interest, a bit of texture in here perhaps. But let that bleed out. That will keep on moving. You can actually see it moving as we speak. And we'll let this dry, and then we'll go back into what we're doing with the tree itself. Now what we have is something which has got a darker background, which is jumping forward, and we've got a big shape in the middle, which is vaguely indicated as having a deeper tone, a mid-tone, and a light tone, but it's very vague. It's just an indicator. So what I want to do now is get a wee bit more specific, if you like. For example, I know that tone, or that color I should say, is probably too red. So I want to grey that down, and what I've done is I've mixed some burnt umber with a little ultramarine blue, which gives me a really quite a deep earthy color. You can see it right there, very grey, but you can just about see the brown through that, which is maybe more accurate as to the tone of the tree itself. And I'm going to go in down this edge and begin to try and draw a wee bit more, make a few more interesting shapes and things down that dark side. So what I'm going to do is drop this in first of all, put this in. You can see how deep that is, but I'm going to go ahead with that. And it's not dead straight either, so I'm going to break that up. You can see, and I'm laying in quite deep tones here. Goes across there a little bit, down here. Let that come in and maybe break over that way. And then just take our brush, rinse it, and again with a broken mark and just some water, we're teasing this dark paint across, because there's just enough moisture still in the paint I've just put on. And you see what I'm doing, I'm not stroking gently in one direction, I'm squiggling around. The reason for that is you can see that those types of marks are creating a sort of an interesting, almost bark-like forms. This little bit here that we did earlier, I'm going to go back to that because that's very, very dark and we need to repaint that. Now I'm going in with rinse the brush and again clean water, and I'm teasing this tone over a bit more. So I'm using the reservoir almost of paint that I put on at the start to work its way. So the remains of that are being dragged over and dragged over until we get to the lighter area. And again, because I'm moving the paint, or moving the brush I should say, in this squiggly way, you can see that that type of mark is, as I say, encouraging a slightly lumpy looking surface on this tree. You know, and I can go in, I actually noticed that there was a wee bit of shadow going across there at one stage, so I'll see if I can get that in, put those big strips in, so the colour is going down, and then with my brush and just a tiny little bit of water on that, just squiggling around to encourage it to bleed and become more like it looks like a part of the tree, if you like. What I'm going to do actually is just put a little bit of shadow here and there on near the edge there, just to give it a wee bit more roundness. And it's not necessarily on the photograph, but this time breaking the other way. So I'm using the paint that I have on, using a clean, slightly, ever so slightly wet brush, just to tease that over, squiggling and moving around, almost like figure of eight shapes, to create this sort of interesting, rugged sort of form within it. What we'll do is we'll get into this area here, which had this kind of basically a hole in the middle there. So let's put that in like almost like a peanut shape. And again, with the brush rinsed and just barely damp, we're going to squiggle the edges of that, tease the edges of that out, so that it doesn't look like something stuck on the tree, as it were. And again, rinse. And the cleaner the water, of course, the lighter the paint. The cleaner the water, the less, the more the paint will dilute, I should say. And keep moving it around, moving around. So what we've got now is a stronger sense of shadow on that side of the tree, stronger sense of this being a hole in the middle of the tree, or not in the middle, but at the side of the tree. And maybe, I know we can't see the bottom, but what I might do here is just pretend, the way we have roots going in. So let's paint those as V shapes. So I'll just put a bit more paint on there actually. So we've create our reservoir. You know, this is the source of our paint. So you can hear me, I hope, rinsing the brush now. So I'm not applying any more paint. The paint is here. This is what I'm going to work with. And I'm going to make this paint bleed itself way into the rest of the picture so that it belongs. So you know, that original piece of paint I put on is enough to do that. And when I get a line here, I can just go in with a damp brush and tease it a wee bit more. And obviously one of the things is knowing when to stop this, because it can be very addictive. And being the person I am, I do get carried away with squiggles and marks and things. So I'm going to stop for a moment. I'm going to let that dry, and then we'll go in and see what we can do with regards to the marks, the textures that we see in the tree. This is pretty dry now. What I've done whilst the middle section was drying was I deepened the background slightly more and tried to wipe away a few bits to create a wee bit more variety within the colours in the background, just while I was waiting for this to come around and dry. What I want to do now is trying to create some of the cracks and surfaces that were in this tree, this trunk. Now what I'm using, you can see, is a tiny little brush, really quite a small brush. It's number 1 or number 2 actually, round brush here, a little soft nylon brush, that's all it is. And I'm still working with the umber and the blue, but primarily the umber actually, you know. I just want to, you know, I don't want it to become too severe. But what we're going to do is put in the paint as we did before, and then work it with another brush. So there's my slightly bigger brush. I'm going to try this and see how it works. It might need a flat brush, but I kind of think that spreads nicely and it's soft, so I can dab with that. So what I can do is begin as we did before, just placing little marks along there, and just, you know, in a broken line, and only evenly, you know, don't want it to follow too much of a pattern. And then if you look and see what I'm doing now with just a barely damp brush, a slightly bigger brush, I'm just dabbing it down, and I'm wiping it and dabbing it. So every now and again I'm just giving it a little wipe with a cloth here, a clean cloth, so that I remove the paint, dragging it ever so lightly, tapping those into shape. So what looked initially like stripes, which is what they were, and now melding them together, they look dirtier, they look less perfect, but they're sort of slowly integrating into the tree, as it were. And I can, you know, again, it depends on how much detail you enjoy, but we can create some thicker, some thinner cracks here as we go across the other side of the tree. And we just work those in. Again, you just take what I've got, damp brush, slightly bigger brush, and just with the flat edge of that, I'm tapping it, just creating a little moisture around them. And what that does is cause the hard line to go softer at the edges, so that it's not absolutely crisp, because then it might look more like it's meant to be something that's stuck on the top of the tree instead of being part of the tree. So my marks are ever so gentle. I'm touching the paper, and that's it really, and moving on, keeping on this sort of pattern here. Go back to my my smaller brush, and again we can create little marks here, some again thicker, some that side there, as it sort of begins to go off in that direction, curves away slightly. Some of these can be very tiny, but they're going to merge, you see, together as I work the paint with the other brush. So maybe down here they do become maybe thicker, more dense as I get down to these roots area, where the roots come out from the tree, you know. And let me make a few more of those there. And let's come up and do a few more here. So, you know, maybe a long one there, you know. So it's fairly random in a sense, but what becomes more important is this bit where we just begin with our brush to merge them, almost like tapping, you know, almost a reassuring tap, you know, like to meld these in to the rest. And the residue of the paint that gets moved around creates a nice additional surface as well. Because this paper allows the paint to be lifted off quite quickly, therefore the paint won't become a permanent fixture. As long as I keep adding water, I can begin to merge it and play with it, so on. If I think I'm carrying too much paint across, then clean the brush, of course, because it's when we have a dirty brush and we're just lifting one from another. But these vertical tapping marks slowly begin to create a merge in there into the paint itself. I'm just looking at the surface again just to see. You can see that some of these become really quite big actually. Some of the cuts and things around here, so we can start to be maybe coming out of this area here, this hole, if you like. It can be quite strong, so I'm just actually loading up a little more paint on the brush here so I can get some nice deep tones. And obviously as it goes into the shadow, these are more intense anyway because they are carrying, if you like, more shadow. So that's why I'm making these more dense. They're becoming lighter towards the lighter side here. Create that there. Again, they look kind of just like strokes. And then I'll take my little brush and gently drag these through into each other. A little bit more, dragging them. Some of them might even merge into one, but that's okay, you know, that it's just suggestions of light in between them. Wiping and tapping all the time. So we're beginning to see how, as we come into the shadow, that there's an illusion of wrinkliness. And it is just a relatively slow process, but just a rhythmic process that needs to be kept on going until you see something emerging. So, you know, if I go back to my paint, I might say, well, you know, if I was to put in a strong dark area here, for example, so in other words, thicker lines, cracked lines about there, and if I then take my dabbing brush, as we'll call it, just clean, very slightly damp, and again dragging it vertically, one into the other, what happens is I create the illusion again that there might be a dip in that tree. In other words, there might be a little concave section there, because obviously darker tones very often or mostly suggest depth. So it's like wrinkling in and out there. And I can play around with that idea. So you can tell already that, you know, I'm not necessarily following super astutely the painting, or the photograph I'm working from. I just want to see or show you the method by which we can create illusions of bark and illusions of trees and things. So maybe these get really thin near the edges of that side. You know, they don't have to be perfectly straight, because your dabbing brush will drag them into a better position. So here we go with the softer brush, damp brush, tapping, and just as if we were pulling gently, teasing literally these marks together. Rinse the brush, give it a wee wipe, back, dragging it. Don't worry if you get a wee bit of water flowing there, you can mop it up. But the main thing is we're creating, merging these lines together. And we're slowly but surely, I hope, creating this surface. And we can keep on with that for quite a long time. I'm quite enjoying the process, and maybe, what it means is we might need to darken this hole in the tree a wee bit later on, because I want to put these nice dark tones in there, and maybe around the roots they're coming out, these lines here, that the roots aren't totally smooth. So let's put a few down there, growing up from there. And again, at the moment, when you see them going on first, they'll always look kind of odd, but it's only this. It's when we talk about edges, we merge the edges together. We can control the different densities of the paint that you put on. So when they first go on, they look very dense, very intense. But now as I'm dragging through them, I'm watching them. And watching very carefully is important. Is that bit working? Can I work that a wee bit more? Can I, now I've got, just pretty clean water on this brush, and what I'm doing now is just dragging a few more marks down here, so that we don't have it absolutely light. It's lighter than the other bits, but not kind of white or anything. And go back in here where I had marks before, just merge them a wee bit more if you like. And remember that because of the nature of this, you watch this damp brush go down now slowly. You see how we're lifting out an entire light area there. So I could actually create highlights if I wanted by lifting it there. Rinse the brush clean again. Might say maybe in the shadows there's a wee wrinkle there in the tree that's just lifting out light. So if I put a little water on it and go in with a very dry brush and mop it up, I can remove that and create the illusion that there's bits of light maybe within the shadow, because sometimes the wrinkles in the tree are pointing towards the light, even this area here. So what I'm hoping is you're beginning to see how we can create surfaces and textures. What I said just by the way was I did want to darken the hole in the tree, so I'm adding again some more ultramarine. So the more ultramarine I add to the umber, the darker it will probably get and the colder. So I thought maybe what we could do is just create this darker hole, if you like, here in the tree. Now, same process applies. What I'm going to do is with the damp brush, ever so gently soften that in to the rest. Rinse the brush so we're not carrying the paint everywhere, we're just controlling it. And what we notice, of course, is the light is catching one edge of the rim of the hole. So what I'll do is I'll use my brush, clean water on it. You see him rubbing back and forward, back and forward, back and forward. So I just get a bit of moisture on there, and then clean the brush dry as I can. And now I'm very slowly moving it, and I'm soaking up the paint, leaving this nice little light line, which kind of looks like the edge of a hole, if you like. And so we can begin, or we can continue with this process until we build up a very rich surface if we wanted to. I haven't carried it on up there, but hopefully what you see is some demonstration as to how to create some sort of surface on a tree like this. What I have begun to do, just as a sort of an additional touch here, I've been tinting this slightly. Hopefully you see that, with a little bit of a lemon yellow, a little bit of ultramarine, tiny wee bit of brown in there, umber, just to make it that sort of warm color. But just as a little additional experiment, and this is important, I think, as part of our process, that you are willing to experiment. It could be quite nice. I'm just gonna see what happens if we lift away some extra light. So I'm putting cold water, clean water I should say, along the edges here. You can't see it too much at the minute, but it's because it's clean water. And then I'm going to go in, I might even go in just as a matter of interest with this brush, which you can see is quite a large flat brush. And into this bit that is now wet, you can see, I hope, this paint lifting away, lifting some more light out there, and maybe lifting away at the edge here. And just thought it might be kind of nice to watch what would happen if we increase the light on that side. It might be kind of nice. So I'm wiping the brush clean and dry, and slowly with the side of that flat brush, ever so slowly, mopping up the paint. So I'm kind of taking away some of the paint that I had on, but what it's done is create a nice kind of a light on the side of this tree, and maybe even just bring it down the side there. Again, cleaning the brush completely dry, and just taking the edge of the brush right here, and you can see it lifting out the light, and we're creating, you know, quite a nice glow on the side of the tree. What I want to do now is just have a think about how we can make these suggestions of surfaces and branches in a freer sort of a way, because watercolor, like all paints, can be used in many different ways. And what we've just seen in the previous part of the video was a careful, systematic approach, you know, where I laid down the little fine lines, and then I sponged them in very carefully to build up a surface. And that is one way to do it. And the reason I wanted you to see that was it is a very good exercise for forcing you to control paint in a very delicate way, followed by a broader way, and so on. So it gets a nice range of movement in your hand. However, it is quite easy to talk about watercolors in a looser way as well. So I just thought, I have a blank sheet of paper here. I haven't even drawn branches and things. I'm just going to draw as I go, because what I want you to look at more is the marks, or are the marks that I put down. We talked about shape, tone, edges, and marks. And in the case of this, the branches and things, if we know the light and shade and where we want light and shade, and if we know the type of mark we want to make with our brush that would perhaps suggest wood or whatever it happens to be, if you can combine those two, you can do it quite quickly and loosely. What I mean by that, I'm just taking, and I'm just going to take this, okay, so I'm drawing with the brush here, and already I'm thinking marks. Do you notice that I've broken up those marks? It's not a soft, slow, continuous line. It's a wee agitated mark, because I think this is a branch, you know, maybe this piece of branch coming out from there somewhere, I don't know. And you see already that it looks rugged because I've made these broken up marks. And this is very important. How you begin a painting is really important. Then you might say, okay, well, there are dark bits, there's shadow here, shadow there. Choose where you want the shadows to be, or where you believe them to be. So maybe the light is coming from up underneath here. So I'm daubing some dark areas here, look along quite randomly, but do you see what I'm doing? I'm still thinking marks. I'm still thinking the way I'm making imprints with the brush, I want it to look like a tree. If I was painting, for example, like that, you know, filling them in very carefully, it wouldn't have that quality. So practice your mark making. Now, even with what we've got, I've just rinsed the brush. I've taken more or less most of the paint off the brush, and this is a brush, it's got a little bit of water on it, and before that other paint dries, I'm wriggling around. Again, you notice I'm moving quickly. I'm trying to think about the agitated marks that we get on a branch or a trunk of a tree, okay? And I'm working these darker lines across, the marks across towards the bottom where I believe it to be perhaps a little bit lighter. And you can see now that with that bit of agitating and, you know, stabbing and there's an element of experimentation. It takes practice and just, you know, having a go to see what it looks like. Sometimes it will work better than others, believe me, but you know, go ahead and do it anyway. What I'm doing is I'm just getting together a little more of this burnt umber and a tiny little bit of blue. So it actually, I'm using very little strong color, you know, as in bright color. I'm thinking, let's put in some nice more dark shadows down in there. Maybe some of them creep across around the branch, you see, like that. and maybe down here and so on. Maybe there's a dark edge to the other side, so it goes dark, light, dark, which is usually what happens with cylindrical type objects, pipes, tree trunks, things. So watch the point of my brush. It's constantly moving. My hand is twitching almost all the time. You see that? And that's what I'm doing in order to try and make my suggestion that this is what it is. It's a tree trunk or branch. I can then take, if I want, and just drag some of these across. This is pretty much a dry brush here. I'm just dragging across, thinking, yeah, that might be kind of nice. Look at this, the green that we might get in a tree trunk or an big old branch there. And maybe, and this could be maybe not a good idea, but I'm going to try it anyway. A little bit of green in there, just that suggests there's moisture or moss, I should say, here and there along the branch. Tap, tap, tap. It's not careful, it's deliberately quite loose. Then I'm going in with a slightly moist brush, working around here, soaking that up so that it's not too green. So I'm removing as I go. I'm putting it on, removing, putting it on and removing. And I'm getting something that's suggesting this nice rugged surface here. And of course I could go back on my old technique of sponging out. I could remove, you see with the dry brush, take a lump out of that and say, well, maybe there's like a knot hole here. So let's rub that. Let's get in with our nice dark area and put the shadow around there. Look, that ring there. Clean the brush. Now the paint's on. Now I'm just modeling it a little bit and then lifting that out a wee bit more. So there's a suggestion perhaps of a chunk out of the branch there, you know. I can do it again. I can do a different type of a thing. We'll just keep this theme going, you know. It's a great practice. Watch, boom, 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 you know. Have a bit of fun here with branches, you know. This is going to be slightly bigger, thicker branch, let's say, coming up here. But you see from the moment, from step one, it's agitated lines. It's lines that look like the lines in the branch. And if you go with that feeling sometimes, I know that sounds very Zen-like, but if you go with the movement you feel when you look at something, it can work really quite well. You see, even with not much paint on the brush, I'm still moving the brush, twirling it. I'm watching every movement. I'm not just doing this and sort of, you know, thinking about something else. I'm watching, oh, look at that. That's nice. That's good. Leave that. Don't like that so much. I want to get rid of that. So you're always making decisions. But I'm thinking, let's work with that sort of mark. Then we'll drop in, you know, some nice bits there. You know, you could almost take a random dots. I look at that. I haven't thought too much about where those dots are, right? They're just 4 or 5 dots. The paint is moving constantly because it really is quite wet now. But I can then just take my brush and play around with it. I can actually change the brush, of course. Different type of brush, flat brush, watch. Of course, that will make different marks. So this time, maybe I'm thinking, okay, flat brush makes flat marks. Tap, tap, across the way, drag through here. Wipe the brush occasionally, giving a little wipe here in the rag. So with the sharp edge of this flat brush, like a knife, I'm able to create marks that maybe suggest, I don't know, is it a birch tree or something like that? You know, so I'm inventing these branches this time, but in a way that allows me to be more relaxed about making marks. So, you know, there are 2 ways to approach practice in this business of making marks and making surfaces. One is a formal, systematic, you know, put it down and watch, as we did in step 1. And this way, we're working in a much freer sort of way. I'm just going to make this a more dramatic color here. I'm going to, let's get that whole side there much deeper. So there's a wee bit of green going in there, which I kind of like as well. Just again, blobs of color. But now I'm watching, okay, what are they doing? What's going to happen when I go in with my other brushes? I'll go in with that flat brush again. This time I'll use, this is pretty much completely dry. And I'm just going to very carefully drag that and see what happens. So now, of course, you get some lovely things. Wipe the brush again, because there's always a chance that you carry lots of paint over. And we've got something different going on here. We've smoothed the thing right down. We've darkened it. We've got rid of some of the agitation. So it's a calmer sort of a thing. And then I might even take, okay, same flat brush. Watch what happens if I lift bits out there. So you get in these birch trees sometimes, you know, bits cut away. So you can see gently. Don't want to damage the paper much, you know, a little bit of water and just mop that up with the dry. You know, every few seconds I'm wiping on this cloth here, you know, so when you see the brush going out of shot, that's what's happening to it. So I'm rubbing there, dragging it around and watching. And when I think, yes, that's beginning to evolve in some way, and keep an eye on the paint and how it is drying or not drying. Obviously, you know, if you rub it a very dry piece of paper, then you know, you can kind of ruin that. But you can see we've changed it again. There's a different quality of mark running up the edge of this particular branch or tree or whatever. I'm going into the other side here just to catch a wee bit of light, because as I say, usually you'll have a little bit of reflected light on trees, you know, that if there's light here, there'll be a little bit of light to a lesser extent on the other side. So I'm mopping the brush, gently wiping it away, mopping it, drying it, I should say, and then mopping that away just to create a little more. Then it's up to me and up to you, whatever. You can, of course, continue and go in with very fine marks. You could play with this idea for a long time. There's our little number 2 or whatever. I think it's a number 2. And I'm just going to go in this time. I'm going to make a slightly warmer green. There's a little bit more burnt sienna in that, so it's just cadmium yellow, burnt sienna, and a tiniest touch of ultramarine. But you know, maybe just introduce something else here. This time it is. So we've started off boldly, but we can maybe begin to tighten it up if you want, because you get all these little spots and things on trees, you know, marks and things. So I've started boldly, very loosely, but then I can tighten and go into further detail if I want. Go back in a sense to the technique we used in the last section. This is just a barely dry, a barely damp brush that I'm just taking and just dusting across that warmer color to integrate it in. So we're giving a little golden quality to the edge of the branch there, and maybe just put a little stain of that up at the top just to balance it out. Just a little bit of color and no more. What I'll do very quickly is just, you know, to help maybe contextualize it a wee bit, is just to put a little bit of color in behind there, you know, just to get rid of that white, you know, just to maybe suggest maybe the sky or something. It just complements the earthy colors as well. So just drop that in around there, you know. So they are invented surfaces, but you can see how we can create them with lots of marks. And this is, you know, it's obviously a great, quite a fun thing to do as well. So this is a second possibility as to how to create surfaces. But I would like you to try both. One that's systematic and carefully planned, or more carefully planned, and one like this, which is a lot freer and more spontaneous. What I'm going to do here, just since is just wipe occasionally into this and see if I can bring out some lights So I'm putting a little bit of water in, going with the flat of the brush, rubbing against the grain of the brush, poking the brush forward and back gently, and then just gently sponging that out so we can lift other bits out there as well. We can go back into this one if we want and soften that in, that edge there. It's I was going to say it's limitless. It's not limitless because there is a point where all paint has a limit to what it can do before there's a danger that it might lose, it might damage the paper, or maybe just lose the quality that you originally had. What I'm going to do might be kind of nice, just go down the edge of that. And I don't know for sure what's going to happen. This is how we learn, I wanted to, soften, not soften the edge, but make it less rugged down that side. I don't know why, it's just something I want to do to practice these marks. And again, just very, very gently, just take and drag again. I'm on this theme of horizontal lines this time. Just dragging that out. It's bled into the background a wee bit, which is understandable because I probably should have let that dry. But anyway, so I just wanted that to become a bit rounder and deeper there. And what we'll do is I'll try to mop that up while I'm at it, just slightly there. And you can continue this using all sorts of different brushes. I'm just using up the remainder of the paint that's on my palette here. I have a little space in here. This might be damp, but I could break some branches off here. Same gesture, do you see that? And the same squiggliness. Let's say that's coming up off that. Dark there. Maybe that disappears in behind the other one. So it's a series of dark lines or dark marks. Now with the brush, I'm just going to merge them into the light bits. So I'm creating the lighter parts. You see how I'm just dragging and sponging and dragging out, so that suggests the lumpiness to the twig or the branch or whatever it is there, you see, and happens really quite quickly. As I say, it's an invented thing, so it probably looks a little bit odd, but it's a good way to practice this. We could take. I'm just going to put one here. I don't know really, just for the sake of it. Tiny wee bit more blue into my mix here, just to create a little depth. Maybe that one's coming up and behind there. Look, but again, look at the marks, the jiggly marks I'm making with my brush. I'll put that over the top of the other one there. Dot there. You see, it's the empty gaps where you can still see the blue. Just a few dots, right? Then rinse. Take a damp brush and occupy. Just tease that dark into the light, so you create. This is the word edges that we've been talking about. Softer edges, but it suggests a three-dimensional form, perhaps, within a branch or a twig or whatever. Just take that, tap that around so that we merge the marks together and sort of disappear in behind that one, perhaps. Maybe not working so well, and then wiping out the odd bit away, so maybe we just take and wipe an upper part of that away just to suggest the light catching the edge of that one, and so it goes. But you see, all the time my hand is moving really quite quickly, because that's what it feels like. The marks on the branches are what I would call fast marks. When we used to teach drawing in the college, we taught slow drawing, fast drawing, and certain things have fast marks that you have to apply quickly to get that sweep, and some have slower marks, which is more careful. But you can see, I hope, there's a ruggedness beginning to happen in there, and I would encourage you to have a go at this method as well as the slightly more systematic method that we looked at earlier.